Chloe was the family's golden trophy. At least that's what her toxic parents wanted the world to see. They forced her into medical school, ripping away her love for art just to brag about their doctor daughter. They even arranged for her to marry a wealthy surgeon she barely knew. But behind the perfect facade, Chloe held a truth that could burn their pride to ashes. Her degree was nothing but a fake piece of paper, and she was about to use it to destroy everything they built. Have you ever dreamed of exposing your toxic parents like Chloe did? Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop a yes in the comments if you dare fake your own future just to take your freedom back. For as long as Chloe could remember, her life had never really belonged to her. From the outside, she was the perfect daughter, polite, quiet, obedient, and smart enough to get into a prestigious medical school. But behind every smile was a girl suffocating under the weight of her toxic parents' endless demands. Her father, Daniel Whitmore, was a well-known local businessman who craved respect more than love. Her mother, Elaine Whitmore, was no better, a woman who measured success by how envious her friends were of her flawless family. For them, Chloe was not their daughter. She was a shiny trophy they could show off at dinner parties and charity galas. Chloe had always dreamed of painting, messy, colorful canvases that spoke truths no degree could. But the moment she whispered art school, her father slammed the door shut on her dreams. He looked her dead in the eyes and said, "No daughter of mine will waste her life as a starving artist." So, at 18, Chloe packed up her brushes and traded them for lab coats and endless nights memorizing medical textbooks she secretly hated. 4 grueling years passed. Chloe dragged herself through lectures, tests, and clinical rotations, each day feeling like an actor playing a role she despised. Her only comfort came late at night, when she'd lock her bedroom door and paint on the back of discarded medical forms, her hidden rebellion against her toxic parents' iron grip. But the real nightmare began when graduation neared. While other families celebrated their children's hard-earned degrees, Chloe's parents were busy turning her future into their next big PR stunt. Her mother arranged a lavish engagement to Nathan Ellis, a young, charming surgeon whose family's wealth and connections would skyrocket the Whitmores' social standing. Chloe had met Nathan only 3 times. He was polite, handsome, and so deeply woven into his own family's expectations that he barely noticed Chloe's distant smiles. Their engagement was less about love and more about 2 families exchanging assets. Chloe would be the perfect doctor's wife. Her parents would bask in the praise of having raised such an accomplished daughter. It was at the engagement party, surrounded by champagne glasses and fake congratulations, that Chloe overheard the truth. Hidden in whispers between her mother and an uncle, she caught words that made her heart freeze. "We'll pay off the wedding loans once Nathan's family invests in Daniel's project." Her parents weren't rich enough to fund this fairy tale on their own. They had quietly taken out massive loans for the grand wedding and expected Chloe to deliver their payoff by marrying into money. That night, Chloe stared at her reflection for hours. She saw a girl wearing a dress she hated, with a ring that felt like a shackle. Her whole life had been spent living for them, sacrificing her passion, her freedom, her very identity to prop up their hollow dreams. But that night also awakened something fierce inside her. If her whole life had been a lie, why not make it her weapon? She realized she didn't owe them a real degree, only the illusion of one. If they wanted a fake daughter so badly, she'd show them just how real a fake could be. So Chloe did what no one expected from the ever-obedient doctor-to-be. She stopped showing up for her final classes. Instead, she spent her time forging documents, hacking together a convincing diploma with online templates and some clever printing tricks. Every penny she could scrape together went into planning her escape: a secret savings account, an old friend in IT who helped her cover her digital tracks, and a quiet, burning plan to flip the entire game. To the world, Chloe was still the flawless Whitmore daughter, future doctor, soon-to-be wife of a wealthy surgeon, the pride of her toxic parents. But in the shadows, she was an artist again, this time painting her masterpiece of revenge, stroke by careful stroke. She smiled at every family gathering, nodded through wedding meetings, and let her parents boast about her bright future. And every time they bragged, Chloe's resolve hardened. She would let them build their fake castle higher and higher, so when it fell, the crash would be loud enough to drown out a lifetime of forced silence. Because this time, Chloe wasn't just going to escape. She was going to make sure her toxic parents paid for every dream they crushed and every lie they forced her to live. And it would all begin with a single, fake piece of paper. If Chloe's life had been a stage, then her toxic parents were the relentless directors, barking orders from the wings while she recited lines she never believed in. But one slip of a conversation backstage was all it took to tear the curtain down. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when Chloe's carefully arranged illusions began to collide with her parents' secret debts. She'd just gotten home from a study session, really an hour at a quiet cafe, sketching ideas for the future she still didn't dare admit out loud. She stepped into the hallway to find her mother, Elaine, on the phone, pacing like a caged animal. Through the half-closed door of her father's study, Chloe heard words that made her stomach twist. Once Nathan's family invests, we'll pay off the loan sharks. Yes, the wedding gifts alone will cover the interest. Loan sharks. Wedding gifts. Investment. Her father's voice was calm, calculated. The same tone he'd used when convincing her to abandon art for medicine. To the outside world, Daniel Whitmore was a respected businessman. But Chloe knew the truth now. Behind the polished suits and community awards lay desperation and a crumbling empire he was propping up with her life. That night, Chloe lay awake replaying every moment. The forced major, the arranged engagement, the fake smiles at country club galas. Everything about her life was currency. Her degree, her marriage, her entire existence traded like chips at a table she never chose to sit at. She realized then that her toxic parents didn't see her as Chloe at all. She was an asset, a pawn, a name to print on invitations and brag about in hushed gossip circles. For the first time in 24 years, the anger didn't come with shame. It didn't feel wrong. It felt like oxygen after years underwater. Chloe's heart pounded as the truth settled in. They weren't just controlling her, they were selling her off to save themselves. It was this betrayal that snapped something inside her that no forced lecture or tearful plea ever could. The next morning, over burnt toast and bitter coffee, Chloe watched her parents discuss the wedding menu as if nothing was wrong. Her mother scrolled through a list of luxury florists. Her father signed off on guest seating. To them, she was a doll in a white dress, a guarantee of cash flow and social status. Chloe looked at her mother's perfectly polished nails tapping her phone screen and her father's pen gliding over debt papers disguised as invoices. She pictured the years of late nights memorizing medical terms she hated, the art supplies hidden under her bed, the endless, "when you're a doctor" speeches that drowned her real voice. She wanted to scream. Instead, she smiled. And then she began her real education, not of anatomy or pharmacology, but of leverage and secrets. She stayed up all night reading contracts, digging through her father's emails, mapping every cent funneling through the wedding fund. She realized with a sharp, thrilling clarity, the wedding was nothing but a financial lifeline for the Whitmores. They needed Nathan's family's reputation and money to hide the truth that the Whitmore name was rotting at its roots. The thought of being someone's pawn had once paralyzed her. Now, it lit her spine with steel. A week later, Chloe sat through her final exam, the one she had no intention of finishing properly. She'd already arranged the fake diploma, the falsified transcripts, the perfect performance. Professors thought she was shy, polite, quiet, the ideal student they never looked at twice. She thanked them for the lectures she never planned to use. She smiled when they called her Dr. Whitmore. Back home, her parents threw her a private graduation dinner. Chloe wore a soft blue dress she hated and posed for photos she'd later use to sell the lie. They raised their glasses to "Our daughter the doctor" and whispered about the wedding, the guest list, the cash gifts, the investments, the next phase of their empire. To them, Chloe's future had already been spent. That night, Chloe stared at herself in her bathroom mirror. She saw the polite daughter they'd built like a puppet. Then she looked deeper and saw the girl who painted on stolen scraps of paper, the girl who once dreamed of color instead of white lab coats. She realized she was both, and both parts were done being silent. She whispered a promise to her reflection. If my life is a lie, then you'll drown in it too. Her first move was small. She opened a hidden bank account under an alias she'd used for her old art commissions. Every week she began transferring small sums from the wedding fund, just enough to keep her father's spreadsheets from blinking red. She covered the trail with forged receipts and fake vendor emails. If anyone bothered to check, and no one did, it all looked like standard deposits for floral arrangements, photographers, caterers. Her second move was bolder. She reconnected with a college friend who'd dropped out of cybersecurity school to freelance in the shadows. Chloe paid him with cash she'd stashed from tutoring side gigs. He helped her secure her fake degree, scrub traces of her withdrawals, and plant digital evidence of payments that never existed. Every piece of her plan stitched together like brushstrokes on her biggest canvas yet. All the while, Chloe smiled at cake tastings, posed for engagement shoots, and let her mother gloat about how perfect her life was turning out. Underneath her polite nods, she was counting down the days to the grand reveal. She wasn't sure what scared her parents more, that Chloe might ruin the wedding, or that she might succeed in becoming someone they couldn't control. Either way, the thought made her grin at night when she lay in bed planning her final act. Because Chloe wasn't just going to run away, she was going to make sure the world saw the truth behind the Whitmore's gold-plated mask. And when the mask cracked, every lie they forced her to wear would bury them under the weight of their own greed. Chloe always thought revenge would feel messy, something reckless and impulsive. But standing in the middle of her room, surrounded by fake transcripts and forged invoices, she realized real revenge was quiet, calculated, almost elegant, like signing her name at the bottom of someone else's script and rewriting the ending in invisible ink. Her toxic parents had spent years grooming her to play the perfect daughter. Now she'd use that training to blindside them. Every polite nod, every forced smile, every "yes, mother" was a brushstroke on the masterpiece she was about to finish. The first step of Chloe's plan was control. She needed full command of the money her father was funneling into the wedding. Chloe offered to help her mother manage the payments. "You know how scatterbrained you get with details, Mom. Let me handle the florist, the venue, the deposits," she'd said sweetly over breakfast. Her mother, who loved playing the big-picture mastermind but hated the boring parts, eagerly handed her access. Within days, Chloe had passwords to the family's shared wedding account, vendor contacts, and direct lines to the friends who'd agreed to loan her father money in secret. She was stunned at how easy it was. Her toxic parents had built their entire control on the belief that Chloe was too weak to think for herself. And now that weakness was her strongest disguise. The second step was insulation. Chloe created a separate savings account under a shell name she'd used years ago to sell small paintings online. Bit by bit, she shifted wedding deposits and vendor advances into this new account. She never took too much at once, only small, routine payments. Flowers paid in full, cake deposit settled, venue secured, all on paper. In reality, she sent just enough to the actual vendors to keep them quiet until she vanished. Her college friend, Matt, the same one who'd built her fake diploma, was worth every penny. He'd shown her how to generate fake confirmation emails, fake receipts, and redirect calls. If anyone double-checked a deposit, they'd reach a burner number and hear Matt's calm voice posing as a vendor's assistant. "Yes, payment received. Everything's on track." The third step was secrecy. Chloe played her part perfectly. She posted smiling selfies at dress fittings, hosted bridal showers with forced laughter, posed for pre-wedding shoots with Nathan, the oblivious fiancé who, for all his medical brilliance, never noticed the panic buried behind Chloe's eyes. Nathan's family adored her. They believed every word her parents fed them about how Chloe was the ideal daughter, the future doctor wife. None of them suspected that behind those calm eyes, Chloe was hoarding every dollar they thought would build their power. The last piece of her early plan was leverage. Chloe knew the fake diploma alone wasn't enough. If her toxic parents ever caught on before the wedding, they'd try to force her back into line. So she collected proof, screenshots of her father's debts, recordings of whispered conversations about hush money and payoffs, photos of forged signatures. Matt helped her store it all in an encrypted drive, ready to explode if her parents dared threaten her freedom. Each night, she lay awake rehearsing the moment she'd finally vanish. She'd disappear so completely, they'd be forced to stand under the ruin they'd built, exposed as frauds with no daughter to prop them up. Chloe's only real fear was Nathan. He didn't deserve to be collateral damage. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized he was just like her, a quiet pawn in someone else's game. If he truly loved her, or at least respected her, he'd understand why she had to destroy the stage they'd both been forced to stand on. The night before her final fake vendor confirmation, Chloe looked around her room, at the gowns, the color swatches, the guest list pinned to her corkboard like a threat. She imagined her parents' faces when they found out it was all a lie. She pictured the gossip columns tearing them apart, the friends who'd once envied them turning away in disgust. And she smiled, the same smile she'd forced since she was 17, only this time it wasn't fake at all. Chloe's quiet rebellion turned into a storm the moment she realized how easy it was to make her toxic parents believe every piece of her lie. The more she pushed, the less they noticed, too drunk on their own fantasy of prestige and borrowed power to see the cracks under their feet. With every payment, Chloe shifted away, her parents' debt web grew weaker. Meanwhile, the real vendors started whispering when deposits didn't match contracts. The florist called twice asking about a missing balance. The venue coordinator emailed 3 times. Chloe answered each concern with a bright, apologetic smile. "Oh, that's just my father's office. He's handling the final payments. I'll remind him right away." Her father never suspected a thing. He was too busy bragging at country club dinners about the grand wedding that would put the Whitmores back on top. Her mother spent hours gushing to socialite friends about Chloe's perfect GPA, the honors degree, the fairy tale marriage that would make them the envy of their circle. They didn't see Chloe slipping out late at night, delivering small cash bundles to her hidden account. They didn't notice how she changed her passwords, how she double encrypted her fake degree and wedding contracts. And they certainly didn't see the burner phone she used to record their careless conversations about just enough debt to look important. We'll pay it all back once Nathan's family pitches in. But whispers don't stay whispers for long. One morning, Chloe heard her parents fighting behind the locked study door. She pressed her ear to the wood and caught fragments that made her stomach flip with a thrill she hadn't felt in years. "Some deposits aren't clearing. The decorator's threatening to pull out. Do you know how bad this looks?" Her mother's voice, usually smooth as glass, cracked like cheap porcelain. Her father's calm, measured tone turned into a growl. They blamed each other, then the vendors, then the bank. But never Chloe. She was still the sweet, obedient daughter who would never dare think for herself, or so they believed. Each argument confirmed Chloe's plan was working. The more their flawless facade crumbled, the harder they scrambled to plug the holes, borrowing more, promising more, leaning heavier on the illusion she'd built. They pushed up the wedding date to lock in Nathan's family's money faster. They demanded Chloe smile wider, pose for more engagement photos, assure Nathan's mother that she'd finish her residency right after the honeymoon. Chloe almost felt sorry for Nathan's mother, a kind woman who'd once pulled Chloe aside and said, "You're going to make Nathan so happy. You're everything his father and I hoped for." If only she knew Chloe was about to shatter every Whitmore lie in one night. As the wedding date closed in, Chloe slipped into the role she'd perfected. The blushing bride, the proud doctor, the loving daughter. But beneath the silk dress fittings and cake tastings, her real masterpiece was nearly complete. Her hidden account was full. Her exit plan, a plane ticket, a new ID, a lease on a tiny downtown studio, all paid for with the same money her parents borrowed to buy themselves respect. She rehearsed her final move again and again, how she'd disappear the night before the wedding, how she'd schedule a timed post exposing the fake degree, the vanished money, the mountain of unpaid wedding debts. And she'd leave behind every scrap of evidence: the fake diploma file, her father's secret loan statements, her mother's forged vendor receipts. Leaked to every gossip site that once praised them, she wanted them humiliated. Not quietly, but publicly. Let the neighbors gossip. Let the bank come knocking. Let the same community that once envied the Whitmores spit their name like poison. In the end, Chloe's toxic parents wouldn't just lose her. They'd lose the golden mask they'd forced her to wear for 24 years. And that was worth more than any real diploma ever could be. If you've ever dreamed of watching toxic parents drown in their own lies, drop A in the comments. Like Chloe's plan? Smash that like button, subscribe, and tell us, what would you do if you had one chance to flip your life upside down? The week before the wedding, the Whitmore house transformed into a fortress of tension disguised as celebration. White roses lined the staircase, gold-trimmed invitations sat stacked in neat piles, and every room buzzed with people fussing over last-minute details. But beneath the soft music and polite laughter, Chloe's toxic parents were fighting invisible fires. Vendors began calling more frequently now, voices sharper than before. Chloe's mother snapped at the decorator for daring to ask when the remaining balance would arrive. Her father's smile tightened with each phone call that ended in excuses about bank delays. Chloe watched them with quiet fascination. Two proud architects scrambling to hold up their house of cards while telling the world it was made of stone. Nathan noticed the cracks, too. A few nights before the wedding, he pulled Chloe aside after yet another stiff dinner with their families. His voice was gentle, but his eyes searched hers in a way that made her chest ache with guilt she refused to feel. "Is everything okay with your parents? My mother's worried about some money questions. The venue said something seemed off." Chloe's instinct was to lie, the same reflex she'd been trained to obey all her life. But instead, she placed a soft hand on his cheek, smiled the way she had for every photo, and whispered, "Don't worry, Nathan. I'll take care of it." She meant it, just not in the way he thought. That night, Chloe retreated to her childhood bedroom one last time. The walls were still painted a soft pastel her mother had chosen years ago. Her old paintbrushes were hidden in a locked box under the bed, dusty but never discarded. She pulled them out and laid them on her desk like sacred relics. Beside them, her laptop glowed with the final pieces of her plan: the scheduled posts, the backup files, the timed messages to local reporters who loved nothing more than a scandal featuring the perfect suburban family unraveling in real time. Every file was labeled clearly: her fake degree, her father's secret loans, the forged wedding receipts. Enough proof to bury the Whitmore name in rumor, lawsuits, and public shame. Chloe knew she could have just run, taken the money and vanished quietly, but that would mean her toxic parents could spin another lie. She went crazy. She was ungrateful. She betrayed us. Not this time. This time, she'd give them no script to hide behind. Outside her door, she could hear her parents arguing again, low, hissing whispers about who to blame when the florist threatened to cancel, when the decorator refused to finish the archway without full payment. Chloe closed her eyes and let their panic fill her like fuel. She wasn't scared anymore. For the first time, the girl who once hid under medical textbooks felt free standing in the ruins they'd forced her to build. She checked the time, 2:00 a.m. In less than 24 hours, she'd be gone, a ghost carrying every stolen dollar and every stolen dream they never thought she'd reclaim. At dawn, she'd smile for the final dress fitting, nod through the last rehearsal, and stand beside her mother's trembling hands as they fussed with the veil she'd never wear down that aisle. Because Chloe wasn't just escaping, she was about to pull the first thread in a tangled lie so wide that when it unraveled, Her toxic parents would be left standing in the spotlight they'd always craved, stripped bare for everyone to see. And Chloe? She'd be miles away, free, anonymous, and finally whole. The morning of the wedding, the Whitmore estate buzzed like a beehive on the edge of collapse. White ribbons danced in the warm breeze, catering vans lined the driveway, and guests began arriving in sleek black cars, oblivious to the cracks beneath the gilded surface. Chloe moved through the chaos like a ghost, calm in a silk robe, her mother fussing at her hair, her father barking orders at the wedding planner who now refused to unlock the ballroom until the final deposit cleared. Her mother's hands trembled as she pinned the delicate veil into Chloe's dark hair. "Smile, darling," she whispered, her eyes darting to the doorway as if the truth might storm in at any moment. "After today, everything will be perfect." Chloe almost laughed. Perfect. That word had been her prison for 24 years. Downstairs, the guests mingled with champagne flutes. Nathan's family posed for photos in front of floral arches that might not survive the hour. Whispers drifted like smoke. Someone had heard a vendor complaining about a bounced check. Another caught a glimpse of the wedding planner's tight smile as she made a discreet phone call. At exactly 11 o'clock, the hour Chloe knew her father planned to sign the final marriage agreement with Nathan's father, Chloe excused herself from the bridal suite. She slipped off her veil, picked up her hidden bag from the back of her closet, and stepped into the hallway she'd once tiptoed down to avoid waking her toxic parents after late-night painting. This time, she didn't tiptoe. She descended the grand staircase slowly, savoring every confused stare from distant relatives and family friends. At the bottom, her father turned, ready to scold her for leaving the suite too soon, but the words froze on his tongue when he saw the small duffel bag slung over her shoulder. "Where do you think you're going?" Daniel Whitmore hissed, his voice low, venomous. Chloe held his gaze and for the first time, didn't look away. "I'm going to live my life," she said simply. Her mother, pale as the lilies in her bouquet, stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Chloe, you can't. The guests, the vows." "There's no wedding," Chloe cut in. She turned to the room now. The sea of shocked faces, Nathan's family frozen mid-toast, Nathan himself standing by the altar, confusion twisting into realization. "There's no degree, there's no doctor, there's no perfect daughter. Just your lies. And my freedom." Gasps rose like a tidal wave. Phones buzzed in pockets as Chloe's scheduled posts detonated across the internet. Photos of the fake diploma, screenshots of the fake payments, voice clips of her father bragging about borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. News alerts pinged on lock screens. Some guests raised their phones to film, eager to catch the scandal firsthand. Her father lunged forward, eyes wild, but Chloe stepped back. "Try to touch me and every file goes to the police and the press. All of it," she said, her voice steady. "Your perfect image is gone, and so am I." Behind her, Nathan's mother let out a soft, horrified gasp as the pieces clicked together. The polite smiles, the subtle questions about missing deposits, the rumors of debts. Chloe caught Nathan's eyes once, and saw not anger, but something like sad understanding. He lowered his gaze and said nothing. Chloe didn't wait for more threats. She turned on her heel, pushed through the stunned circle of guests, and stepped out into the sun, into the chaos her toxic parents could no longer hide behind her back. Outside, her taxi waited at the curb. As she climbed in, she could hear the muffled shouts of her parents echoing through the grand entrance hall. They'd built their entire life on her shoulders, and now they'd stand alone in the rubble. For the first time, Chloe wasn't the perfect daughter. She was Chloe, artist, runaway, and the storm that tore down the Whitmore's rotten empire. And this time, the world would see her for exactly who she was. The first thing Chloe noticed when the taxi pulled away from the Whitmore estate was how different the world looked without her parents' shadows stretching over every mile. She pressed her forehead to the cool window glass, watching the manicured lawns and luxury cars shrink in the distance like bad props from a play she'd refused to finish. In her bag sat everything she needed: her passport, her new ID under her middle name, The flash drive with all the proof in case her toxic parents ever tried to spin more lies. And cash. Enough to start over. Enough to remind herself that sometimes freedom costs exactly what others once used to keep you trapped. By the time her father's calls started flooding her phone, Chloe was 3 hours away at a tiny roadside diner. She watched the screen light up with his name, first Dad, then Daniel Whitmore, when she removed the word that never really fit him. Her mother's messages followed, frantic, threatening, pleading, "Come back. Come. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've ruined us." She silenced the phone and left it in the restroom trash before paying her bill with a few crisp bills from her hidden fund. The final boundary was simple. They would never hold her voice hostage again. News of the Whitmores' collapse spread faster than she'd imagined. By the time she reached the small city where her new studio waited, a drafty but sunlit loft above a secondhand bookstore, gossip blogs were feasting on headlines. Perfect doctor-daughter exposes fake degree scandal. Whitmore empire in shambles. Toxic parents left bankrupt after daughter's revenge. Neighbors back home who once envied her family's perfect yard and spotless cars now saw the truth. The Whitmores were just another crumbling dynasty propped up by borrowed money and lies. Old friends texted Chloe half shocked, half in awe. "Did you really do it? Are you okay?" She ignored most of them. She wasn't the girl they remembered anymore. That version of Chloe had died the moment she stepped off that grand staircase without looking back. She read one article that made her laugh out loud in her empty studio. Sources say the Whitmores are considering legal action. But with every receipt, every recording, every forged deal laid bare, there was no one left to believe their side. The debts were real. The fraud was real. And Chloe's quiet digital trail was airtight. She'd made sure her revenge wasn't just a scandal. It was a permanent stain no PR team could scrub clean. Sometimes she wondered what Nathan told his family afterward. Maybe he'd say nothing at all. Maybe he'd understand in his own way that they were both casualties of the same hollow machine. Whatever he thought didn't matter now. Chloe had drawn her line. No more pretending, no more playing the dutiful daughter so her toxic parents could wear her skin like a badge of honor. She looked around her bare studio, just white walls, cracked wooden floors, a single easel waiting for a canvas she hadn't touched yet. For a second, fear flickered at the edge of her mind. She'd burned every bridge behind her. There would be no turning back if she failed. But then she remembered that feeling in her chest as she'd stood at the bottom of that staircase, watching her parents' empire shatter in the eyes of everyone they'd ever tried to impress. That was worth every bridge, every sleepless night, every lie she'd had to become. Chloe had traded her fake graduation for something real, a name that finally belonged to her, and she would never let them take it away again. In the weeks that followed, Chloe's new life unfolded slowly, not like a grand triumph, but like dawn easing the night away. She woke each morning in her drafty studio to sunlight pooling on the floorboards, paintbrushes scattered where she'd left them after staying up too late sketching and mixing colors she'd never been allowed to touch back home. No one called her Dr. Chloe now. No one called her perfect daughter either. She was just Chloe, the girl with paint under her fingernails and coffee rings on her work desk. And for the first time, that was more than enough. She furnished the tiny loft piece by piece, a battered sofa from a thrift store, a mismatched mug collection for late-night tea, a secondhand speaker that filled the silence with old songs she'd never had time to love. Sometimes she sat by the window, knees tucked to her chest, watching the city pulse below. Free people living imperfect lives. She felt more alive among them than she ever did in her parents' grand halls. Word spread quietly in the local art community about the young woman who painted with a fire they couldn't name. She didn't tell them about her toxic parents or the fake graduation that had burned her old life to ash. She let her canvases speak instead. Some days she sold nothing. Other days she sold just enough to pay rent and restock paint tubes. And yet, every sale felt like a victory her old self would have thought impossible. One afternoon, Chloe held her first tiny workshop for girls from a local shelter, kids who knew too well how family could be both home and prison. They painted messy flowers and city skylines, dragons and dreams. They didn't ask about her past, and she didn't ask about theirs. Instead, she told them the only thing that mattered. You don't have to become what they want you to be. Sometimes, memories of her toxic parents clawed back, the echo of her mother's cold instructions, her father's calculating silence, the constant expectation that she'd trade her own voice for theirs. But now, those memories didn't hurt the same way. They were just reminders of the boundary she'd drawn, a line she'd never let them cross again. She knew they were still out there, somewhere, trying to patch the ruins of their image with empty threats and half-baked excuses. But Chloe didn't care. She had nothing left to hide, nothing left for them to steal. The story they'd forced her to live was over. This new chapter, every brushstroke, every awkward laugh with her art students, every late-night mural, was hers alone. Sometimes people asked her if she regretted not having a real degree or a respectable title. Chloe would just smile, flecks of paint on her cheek, and answer, "I have something better, my name, my life." And maybe, someday, her story would reach another girl sitting in a too-quiet bedroom, forced to wear a mask that suffocated her dreams. Maybe that girl would see Chloe's colors, hear her truth, and realize she could run too. She could shatter the mask, burn the lies, and build something raw and real from the ashes. Because Chloe had learned that revenge didn't end when the villain fell. The true victory was what you built when you were finally free to breathe, flaws, scars, and all.